Hello and welcome to another edition of Terrible Business Advice. My name's Neil Stoneham, and today we're going to be talking about one of the biggest challenges that entrepreneurs face, that of pricing. So how exactly do you measure the true value of your product or your service? And more importantly, how much wiggle room are you prepared to give in order to clinch that deal? Some people say not at all. Is that good advice or not? Well, we'll be discussing that in a moment with Kate Jackson. She's an award-winning leadership learning and development consultant, as well as a very savvy entrepreneur. And I've known Kate now for about 10 years. We've worked together in the past. She's currently based in London, but she shares her expertise all over the world, especially in Thailand, where her company helps clients manage talent, develop great leaders, and build employee engagement. Okay, Kate, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here today.
Good morning. Thanks for connecting.
Yeah, great. So obviously you've given lots of advice over the course of your illustrious career, but you want to talk today about a piece of terrible advice. Certainly in your eyes, it's a piece of terrible advice. So tell us what it is.
Yeah, and the advice that I received was it came to me about 12 years ago now, and it still sits with me because it was a certain situation that we'll delve into in this call, but the advice was to never reduce your prices.
Right.
Stand your ground, know your worth and know your value, and never reduce your prices. And based on that, there was this one circumstance with this client who'd invited me in to kind of offer some services, and they had a limited budget. And we were out by not much, by maybe a couple of £100 only. But I turned them down. I said no, I wasn't going to give a discount because I was told to never reduce your prices. I was in my late 20s. So I had moved to Thailand and started my own business before turning 30. And I think that's a great success and a great achievement. But I didn't have much business acumen. I'd come in from being a trainer and a facilitator and an in-house learning and development specialist. I hadn't done an MBA. I hadn't studied anything about, how to set up and run your own business. So I was just feeling my way through this. I knew about what my services were. I knew that I could do a good job, but I didn't really know the ins and outs of really establishing and running my own business. So I was taking advice from anyone, and that one really stuck with me.
So who gave you this piece of advice? Where did you get it from?
Oh, I'm not going to name names.
No, you could be general.
They hear this. It was somebody in my peer network. It was somebody who was a supporter and a sponsor of mine. In fact, they actually were one of my clients. And I think it was coming from a good place. I think it was coming with they genuinely wanted to support me and see me doing well. And I take it as a compliment that actually, I should know my value. I should know my worth. I shouldn't be underselling myself. But I think there's certain situations where, like I face, where I lost a client, where actually you need to stop, you need to pause, you need to think, should I negotiate in this area? Because just walking away and saying, sorry, no, I won't do it for that much, it hurts both parties.
So this person giving you the advice, what do you think their reasoning was behind it? Maybe thinking about the context in which it was given.
Maybe he was telling me that I was too cheap.
Right.
Maybe. Do you know what I mean? I think they were trying to be helpful. It's that advice monster, that many of us carry within us. We want to help people. We want to jump in and give recommendations. And maybe it's something that they were considering themselves as well. If they were in my shoes, if they were in my position, they would, make sure that they are, making that ask, so maybe it's their own self-perception, their own view of what they would be like as a business owner. So I think it was, like I mentioned, I think it's coming from a good place, and I think it's, a sincere support, a piece of recommendation. But for me to hold on to it like it's the law, like you should never negotiate. I think that's what I was holding on to. And thinking, right, if this is the mentality, if this is the advice that I'm getting from people, then I should stick with it.
Yeah, I think this, as business owners, this is what we'd dream of, isn't it? We'd love to be able
Mm.
to be in this situation where you can basically say, "This is my price, and I'm not going
Yeah,
anywhere with it. If you want it, that's what you pay, and if you don't, you can find someone
yeah,
else." But
yeah.
in reality, of course, most of us can't do that, can we? Very, very
No.
few companies do it. The only company that I can think of that does is very sort of rigid with their prices is Apple.
Mm,
And they're famous, aren't they, for just having one price, and it doesn't matter which store you go to, whether you go to an Apple store or a reseller, they're always the same price, and you can't get
yeah.
discounts. And in fact, I did some research on ChatGPT. Help me on this one.
Yes.
With a very modern podcast here,
Hmm.
and I asked ChatGPT about some of the disadvantages of this approach, even
Mm,
for a
mm,
company like
mm.
Apple. Because of course they're coming from the point of view they want to come across as a premium product, don't they? And they're
Yes.
selling that. That's why they want to be quite rigid with the prices. You coming to us because you're desperate to have our products. But there are lots of disadvantages. I mean, obviously, it's as things evolve. When the iPhone first came out, for example, everybody wanted one. It was amazing, and then they tried to improve it. And the first few models, there was quite a big difference, wasn't there, between
Hmm.
models in
Yeah.
terms of its
Yeah.
technology. But eventually, of course, now we have the iPhone 16's just come out. It's not that much different to the iPhone 15. So this is going to be an issue, isn't it, for a lot of people? Are they
Mm.
really going to invest in something that's just a tiny bit different?
Tiny bit
Um,
different.
and
Mm.
also the price is
Mm.
huge, isn't it, for a lot of people? So yeah, it came up with like seven different disadvantages, which I kind of think would fit with what we're just talking about.
Yeah.
So it's a barrier to entry for price sensitive customers.
Yes.
It's
Yes. Yes.
vulnerable to
Yes.
economic downturns. So if economies go south,
Mm.
then people can't afford it. Um, Competition's going to change their prices. They're going to be flexible. So that's going to
Exactly.
cause problems.
Yeah.
People like
These all
Samsung,
resonate.
yeah. And sales expectations sometimes when people go into a store they want to see discounts, they want to know that they're getting a good bargain and all these kind of things. So there's loads of disadvantages to this, but bringing it back
Mm.
to us, because Apple and I suppose can afford to have this policy, can't they?
Yes.
Because they
Yeah.
they are a famous premium product. Lots of people have them. There's a certain culture that goes along with it, but most of us don't have that luxury today.
Yeah.
So let's get back to
Yeah.
this as bad advice.
Hmm.
Why do you think specifically it's bad advice, given the context? And remembering, well, I suppose we're both in the service industry, aren't we? We're both
Yes. Yeah.
trainers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, why is it bad advice in that context, do you think?
I think, well, I'm not a large consulting firm, right? Similar to Apple, I can't go out there with my fixed day rates, and not negotiate on it. I'm not at that stage. I'm not that premium quality to product. Why it's bad advice is from what happened in this certain situation that I keep coming back to and keep thinking about 12 years later is I was asked to come in and provide and design some training and deliver some training for this client. And the person that had asked me invited me in. He had actually been in a previous client. He'd actually worked in another organization, and that's how we'd built that connection. We'd made that relationship. He knew me through experience and word of mouth. So it was actually a compliment that he had moved to an organization and then wanted to take me with him. So I was invited in, I made a proposal and kind of set out my fees. And when they said, no, we can't make that, but we can just make a couple of £100, you know, less, I just walked away. And in hindsight, I could have looked at it from a long-term value proposition. Okay, would I be willing to reduce my fees and my costs on this, knowing that actually he could become a recurring client. I could go on and have years and years and years and years of business with him. And similar to how I'd made the original connection, I could go on to build other connections. I could build a network in this new organization, and they may recommend me to others. So it's kind of all about exceeding client expectation, having that strong relationship, that strong rapport, and through having those meaningful relationships, that word of mouth can spread. So my network could have spread, and I just feel like I've cut off my nose to spite my face sometimes, and,
Yeah.
and removed myself from a situation where it's lose lose.
Mm.
They could have gone on to find a competitor to work with, or they could have just felt like, well, wow, we don't want to be talking to her again in the future. So I think I burnt a lot of bridges when I could have definitely explored a lot of options. Um, I've had the experience of working in pharmaceutical and sales businesses before. So I could have taken what I've learned from them about, creating and being creative with marketing, like looking at bundling packages, looking at, okay, if I sell you now at this price, what could I do in the future? Or what could we set up into the next couple of years to set us up for kind of both of us to be successful? And more recently, I've been working with IKEA, and they had done a real policy transformation, real policy shift about offering refunds and returns to clients, to customers, and making it really easy for them, because IKEA realized that a loyal customer in the long term will make you more money. So if you make it easier for them to do business with you, they will come back time and time again. And that's what I feel like could have explored a little bit more of. Okay, let's make it easy for us to connect and do some business now so that we could have a long-term relationship.
Yeah, and I think I mean, again, it's advice we'd like to be able to take, isn't it? To never drop our
Mm,
prices, but
yes.
realistically, it's just not going to work for us. And you've just explained a situation there where you lost a potentially good client because you wouldn't budge on a couple of £100. And I've been in a very
Mm,
similar situation myself where I was told I was too cheap. So, another associate of mine had looked at my prices and said, for what you're offering, you're probably at the lower end. So I hiked them up, and
right.
this was coming from a person who was quite experienced, so was
Mhm.
able to charge quite high prices. And I tried that, and I know for a fact I lost a couple of client or potential clients because of it, because it was too high. They didn't
Yeah.
even want to negotiate. It was like was nowhere near what we want to pay. So the temptation sometimes when you want to offer a premium service is to go high with the idea that people will come back and say, well, can you reduce your prices,
Mm,
and get down to a point. Now, not everybody will say that. So it's a really tough balancing act, isn't it?
yes.
Because the other thing that we're worried about, I think, as vendors, is to say, right, if we say, okay, we'll go a couple of £100 lower,
Mm,
then are they then going to come back and say next time, well,
exactly.
can you drop it by £500?
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing we don't want to encourage. But
Yes.
I think the idea of bundling and all that kind of stuff kind of works for people, doesn't it? Yeah. So
Yeah.
so this is probably why it's bad advice. Is if you don't have that flexibility, um, it is going to turn off customers potentially, and you might lose them because you're trying to find that sweet spot, and it's the sweet spot in my experience is different for different customers, isn't it?
Yes,
Do
yes,
you agree?
very much so. Yes, very much so. And I think by even engaging in those kind of conversations with a client, partnering with him to go, okay, let's find a resolution together. How can we resolve this together? I think it also puts you in better standard. You could, get yourself on a preferred provider list by building those relationships, showing your interest, showing you're eager to explore things. And I think it will allow you to be a little bit more creative and innovative in your own business solutions, opening up to you like a spectrum of clients that, you know, there's bandwidth and price width that you can move through, and I think that will allow you to develop your own transferable business skills as well by exploring those creative options.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in a situation quite a few times where I've offered a discount. I think you mentioned you did this as well. You
Hmm.
take more than one course, for example, and then we'll give you a discount on that. And that really
Yep.
works because people see they're getting better value. And
Mm.
it works for us because we get more work as well, don't we? So,
Yes.
that kind of flexibility. But I think, like you say, it's about being creative, isn't it? About being trying to be innovate with your pricing strategy, and it'll depend on the client, and it will depend on the situation and where you
Hmm.
are. Because I think there's, sometimes it might pay to go a bit low to start with, because you get in there, don't you? And once they experience the quality, then you can start thinking about coming to a level in terms of your prices that you think you're worth. I mean, but it's harder to
Yes.
go up though, isn't it? It's harder to go up in price than down. That's what I've found.
It's harder to go up, but what I would like to, if I put myself in those shoes, in that position now, I'd probably like to build those relationship with that client, prove my worth, exceed their expectations without, within that budget area, within that freedom, within a framework a little bit, but listen to them and understand and be a little bit more strategic. Listen to them and understand what challenges and other potential training courses I might be able to fulfill. It might be specific negotiation courses, it might be a specific presentation course, or but by having that closeness, by building that rapport, by listening to them, I could have also then maybe expanded the range of services that I could offer to them. I could be a little bit more reactive. I could be, proactive and going, right, okay, we're finding that there's some of your employees are challenged in this area. Let me do that for you.
Mm. And so kind of linked to that, sometimes a good policy is instead of dropping your prices, you offer them something a bit more for the same price. So,
Mm.
you could expand some of those courses, couldn't you, in terms of what they're looking for? But I absolutely agree. I think, well, I do, I'm very reluctant to talk about price origin at the beginning. So if,
Mm.
if I walk into a meeting and one of the client's first questions is, how much is it going to cost? I just say, well, I'll tell you that once I've understood exactly what you need,
Yeah.
because that's when you can start to work out the value, isn't it? So yeah, I think it's probably not good advice for anybody, is it? We've talked about services, but I think the same applies to products.
Hmm.
And obviously when you're looking at products, there's competitors on the market that you can easily see what they're charging and everything. I mean, the difficulty for people like us is that not every trainer, for example, is transparent about their prices, are they?
Mm.
This is what I found.
I think that's getting better, or I don't know
Hmm.
if I'm just getting older and getting more
Right.
experienced. And maybe I'm seeing more conversations about people talking about it. And I think by being in the industry over the past 10 years, I've had the experience of seeing from a buyer's perspective as well as being the vendor the prices that are going around, so I'm able to see kind of those benchmarks in terms of prices, and so thinking I'm okay, I'm meeting the average, and kind of I see myself being in the middle. I'm not too much and I'm not too small, but I think also now I'm experienced enough to say I do know my value and I'm proud of it, and I will enter conversations around negotiating on price now.
Yeah. It's interesting you said that you have some experience now as a buyer or some perspective
Mm.
as a buyer. Do you want to just expand on that a little bit and tell us what you've kind of learned from, especially when we're talking about discounting and all that kind of thing. What have you
Yeah,
learned?
over the past couple of years, I've been working closely with organizations to look at their learning strategy. And that also includes understanding who their training providers are, who their current vendors are, and looking at all the investment costs that they are spending. So I get to see the full range of the different kind of learning and development training providers globally on a global scale as well, looking at Europe prices, looking at America, looking again at Asia. So I get to see like a really um, broad mix of the vendors from both technical through all the way through to soft skills, and a broad range of prices as well. So I think because of that exposure and that insight also gives me the motivation and the inspiration to kind of, okay, you're doing the right thing, you're on the right track.
So in this situation, what's top of mind from a buyer's perspective?
think increasingly buyers are looking at a clear return of investment now. We see a lot. Again, this is me just talking about my industry and my perspective in the learning and development industry. But buyers really want to see a clear return of investment and a return of engagement. So they want skills. We know a lot of people are talking about skills-based organizations now, or, more of an acute laser focus on building skills in the workplace so that organizations can, strategically execute. So I think vendors need to really talk about how they can demonstrate how attending your program or going through using your services shows a return of investment for that employee, but that participant. What will they be able to do as a result of of using your services, and what also is the benefit for the organization? And I think if you're able to clearly demonstrate that, you are able to really command a higher price.
Yes, and I think that probably works across industries as well, not just in ours.
Yeah.
Because obviously the more value that you're able to show, but it's much more competitive out there nowadays, isn't it? And basically, people like us, we're competing with lots of other people offering similar services, and so that's going to be the sweet spot, isn't it? If you can show that value somehow, demonstrate that value, but be very clear about what they're going to get out of it, and then demonstrate that as well, because once you get in there, you can do a course, and then you usually find that works out, and they get some more and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I think that's probably the best policy, isn't it? To start to be very careful about thinking what you're offering and making sure that if you want lots of money, you're offering something which is really valuable and that they're going to struggle to get somewhere else. And then if some people are very vague, they just say, "Well, I'm very good," and that's not good enough, is it? You need to demonstrate that value. So with the service industry like ours, it's more difficult, isn't it? With the product, you can see it, you can feel it, you can see it working, you can get recommendations, but it's much more subjective for our kind of thing, isn't it?
It is, but if we're able to maybe do a little bit of homework and kind of get some data metrics from our clients as well, that can demonstrate return of investment, the benefits to clients, the benefits to the organization, looking at any of their key business metrics, KPIs, targets, and speak the language of the business, then again, I really believe that we can command a higher price because it's going to be transformational, beneficial for everybody involved. So I think if we can, where possible, show our value through both data and qualitative responses will help.
Yeah. And so I suppose the good advice, because what we try to do on this podcast is turn the bad advice into good advice. So yeah, the good advice, I guess, is that we've got to make sure that if we are not going to be too flexible with our prices, I mean, I think we have to be flexible to a certain level, don't we? But if we've decided that we've got our price, we want to be premium, we've got to demonstrate that value in a way that's really compelling. Otherwise, we're going to struggle, and you're going to lose customers as a result, aren't you?
Yes.
So making sure you're engaging with people and getting a much better understanding of what they need, I think, as well, is something that you need to have top of mind, because buyers are looking for that. Budgets are tight. But they want to make sure that what you're offering is going to make a difference, and you're going to be able to show that, haven't you? And sometimes you might have to just, sometimes you could do something like an introductory offer. So say, yes, I'm going to reduce my prices this time. I'm going to give you a 20% discount, but this is just the first time, just so you can get a flavor of what I do, and then it's going to go up. That gives you a certain amount of wiggle room as well, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So can you think of anything else that would be good advice in this context?
I really like the idea of values-based pricing. So just like we were talking about in this call and this flavor, really being able to communicate and convey the value of what you do, and then looking at potentially adding on add-ons and supporting additional ones, courses or services or products after. And I think being honest and open with your clients about your stance and your perspective on things, demonstrate your care, your your willingness to lean in and support them, I think will really help incentivize loyalty and maybe future referrals, because you will be top of their mind. They'll think of you in like a based on that rapport, based on that relationship. If they feel that there's transparency, therefore they're going to be able to put their trust in you, and therefore your credibility goes up as well. So I think by being open and honest, can create loyalty and future referrals as well.
Yeah. So that's brilliant advice. Yeah, I think that sort of nicely ties it up. So we've talked quite a lot about why it's bad advice. Certainly in most contexts, the idea that you should never reduce your prices is probably misguided. But if you want to come across as premium, if you want to, charge high prices, you've got to be able to demonstrate that value, haven't you?
Correct.
But still have that flexibility and look at the options on the table, really.
Yeah.
That's great. So one way I like to finish this podcast is just to ask the guest about one piece of advice perhaps you've given in a particular context, which you kind of regret, and then tell us why.
Yes. So earlier this year, I was supporting and mentoring a number of small business owners. And they had come to me because they've been running their own, founded their own business, and they were running just small organizations, and they were coming to me for kind of performance management and HR advice. And I was kind of running upon a trend that everything's that been kind of covered in 2003, 2004, that some of the leading trends in performance management, learning and development, and leading high performing teams is the notion that managers should be coaches now. And we should kind of really lead our employees with that coaching mentality. However, I was pushing this on my mentees. And I realized recently that actually there weren't really that level of maturity. The issues that they were dealing with were a little bit more serious, and I didn't think coaching would necessarily support them in the challenges that they were facing with their teams, and that actually looking at their business needs and understanding that they may need a little bit more help and support in understanding around proper performance management and talent management processes. And actually, they might have needed a little bit more support in being a little bit more stronger in terms of and how they manage performance, giving them a little bit more confidence to manage performance a little bit more effectively. Because yes, we understand the power of being coached and what it can do to boost creativity, innovation, motivation within the team. But maybe the circumstances weren't right, and maybe that employee who was underperforming needed to be moved into another route and maybe managed and dealt with in a different way. So sometimes I think actually yes, I know the value of coaching, and I do support that and recommend it to individuals and business owners. But I need to know my own target audience a little bit better. Maybe, that advice isn't right for everyone and not the right advice for every situation.
Yeah, that's a great example, isn't it? Because, of course, especially in the training world at the moment, it's a piece of advice that people give all the time. I mean, I've given it, you need to be more of a coach with your staff. You need to, rather than just telling them what to do, you need to, you need to guide them and then ask them questions and all this kind of thing. And most of the time, it is good advice, isn't it? But
it is.
In certain contexts, I mean, you can spend hours or months coaching someone, and if they're not coachable, or if they're just not very good, then that's actually bad advice, isn't it? Because you need to fire them basically, or at least move them to somewhere else.
Well, so, in this certain circumstance, that's just happened this week. So.
Oh, right.
I think she's now looking for a HR labor law lawyer to connect with.
Oh dear. So if she hadn't taken
bad advice.
If she hadn't taken your advice, you'd have been okay by now. Right. Okay. Well, that's brilliant. So, thanks very much, Kate. It was really instructive. I think a lot of people listening to this podcast, particularly if you're in the service industry, are going to take away a lot of good points from this
Yeah.
podcast, because I think we've explored some of the things that I've really struggled with, and I think a lot of business owners struggle with. Certainly, the beginning as well. I mean, when people are new to business and they're trying to, price a new product or service, it's a nightmare, isn't it? How do you get it right?
Yeah.
So I think we've shed some light
Yeah.
on that. So thanks very much, Kate.
Appreciated it. Enjoyed the chat. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Okay, so there you go. Hope you found that helpful. I certainly found it quite inspiring. A lot of what Kate had to say there really resonated with those of us who are always struggling, really, to think about how we price our products or our services. So, really good. Now, there's more of that to come. So stay tuned. Make sure you like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And I look forward to seeing you on the next edition of Terrible Business Advice. Goodbye.